Hi there, Hollywood Times viewers. Judy Shields here. Today we welcome President and founder of Birman Productions, as well as director, writer, and cinematographer. Thank you for joining us today, Dan.
My pleasure to be here.
So, where are you dialing in from?
I'm in Altadena, actually.
Oh, were you spared by what
We
happened?
were absolutely spared. My immediate neighborhood was safe. Go a block and a half away, and a lot of friends and neighbors not so lucky. And obviously, this is a center of a bunch of sadness and resilience at the same time. And boy, it's a confluence of issues that our entire community is facing throughout Los Angeles, throughout Southern California.
Yeah, it was really hard to watch that on TV, and I can't imagine what those folks went through. It just makes you rethink life, doesn't it?
That's right. Our priorities change in the middle of disaster sometimes.
Yeah. And it's wonderful to hear that PBS SoCal's Earth Focus is now on its sixth season. The Hollywood Times has been involved since the beginning, and we're a very huge supporter of the show. Um, these shows that are out, there's four of them coming out. It's just like everyone in this country has to watch it because it affects you. I mean, who would know about fashion and protecting our land and our sea, trees, and the wildfires from, as we were talking, electricity. So let's talk about that. And how did you get involved in this project?
Well, we were asked to take a look at the series and to come up with some approaches to a season six and a season seven for Earth Focus. One of the things that our company has been focused heavily on the environment for a bunch of years. We've been working on in that space for a while. And so we were just absolutely delighted when this opportunity came to us. I stop and think about public television. Public television really offers something unique that nobody else offers. You stop and think about it. Viewers who might not have access to uh, ideas, sometimes local,
Mhm.
but ideas, culture, arts, science, discussion points, discussion points that are maybe not taken up by any other media, but that can affect us on a deep level. And I think what was exciting to me is that Earth Focus takes on the subject areas of climate change, sustainability, but contextualizes it in a way that or localizes it, maybe is a better way to put it, so that people who are watching actually feel like they're part of the solution and they get a front row seat to what the problems are, what the science is, and how we as individuals can make a difference.
Bravo, that was so well said because that is so true. We've got an episode, I believe it's coming up on the 25th, Rewiring California Outages and Innovation. That was, something, like I said, we all are concerned with. I also wanted to mention that my son has spent over a year and a half down in San Diego he's a foreman of a crew, putting the electricity from above to below. So I know firsthand what he's been doing and, how kind of dangerous, but it's going to be better for that whole community down there. And he's starting on other communities. Can you touch bases on this particular episode?
Yeah, I think, one of the things that's near and dear to all of us is our use of electricity. We can't live without it now. I mean, computers, smartwatches, cars, our houses depend on it. We are ever dependent on what began about 120, 140 years ago as a big, massive grid that's continental in nature, right? I mean, the continent had to electrify itself. And as we grew, the system kept growing, and it's moved out into the hinterlands because we want to live in nice places. We want to live in places away from the city. So that grid got ever so large. Well, it's also old. Our use of the grid has turned into something where we use a lot of power, a lot of energy, and it puts a lot of demands on electrical system. Well, it also gives us exposure to the possibilities and the problems related to having high energy above ground and how we manage that. So there are a whole lot of implications. Climate change has changed the nature of the impact of the grid on society. We saw that recently with wildfires because we're in the middle of of an area that is affected by climate change, and any kind of a spark, any kind of a whatever the source can create big problems. So there are a lot of people who are looking at the grid from a meta perspective and trying to find ways to make it better, to turn it into the big thinking that would allow us to continue our lifestyles while containing and minimizing the stakes involved with electrical use. So we went to Caltech, we went to San Diego Gas Electric, we talked to the chief of the LA County Fire Department who has to deal with these things all the time. We talked with a lot of people from different points of view who could really help us shed a light on what the future might look like for our use of the grid.
Yeah, very, very informative. I have to say, honestly, after seeing this the other day, I was on teeter-totter getting solar. I now approved it. I'm getting it in 2 weeks on my house. I got to do whatever I can to help my
Well, you know,
grid.
what's kind of interesting on the whole solar front, what's fascinating, one of the things we learned in this episode in doing the work is that part of the future for consumers is that we're not just passive recipients. Your use of solar, as we all know, means that you as an individual get to feed back to the grid and bring power back. Well, we're going to find out, we found out from Caltech, for example, that there are devices that are being used and now implemented in the grid that's going to allow us to share our electricity back and forth, which means we can compartmentalize the grid and make it smaller in smaller chunks and giving people power and autonomy on their use, which is fantastic. You stop and think about it. This is so
Mhm.
exciting. Who else is going to tell that story? This is one of the great gems of Earth Focus is that we get to really look at these stories up close and personal.
And it's so true. And then about the electric cars, they're pushing so much for electric cars and they're having to put the stations in and that one little part about where they're trying to, give back as well. It's
That's
just,
right.
kudos to you guys for showing that one. It's very important that everybody watch that. Another one that was fascinating to me, they all were, but the cost of fast fashion. I mean, I'm a kind of person that has 10 pants and I wear them throughout the month, but I'm older now. But you look at the TikTokers and all these fashion people, how they're just having clothes after clothes. It was so fascinating to find out, how bad this can be to our environment, clothes afterwards.
Yeah, I think it speaks to something that's very human. If something is available to us, we'll
Yeah.
take it, we'll use it, we'll do it. And I think that there's kind of a cyclical thing that happens. Maybe I'm cyclical is maybe the wrong word. There's a feedback loop. So people want stuff, people make stuff, or people make stuff and then people want stuff. Both
Yeah.
of those kind of happen in tandem. But what the manufacturers and what the end users may not realize is that addiction, our need to have more, our desire to have more, and our desire and our access to more means that we're doing something that has an impact on the environment. I mean, for God's sakes, we hear about the effects of plastics, we hear about the effects of dyes and chemicals and so on a very large scale, but none of us really has an idea or clue what to do about that.
Yeah.
It's beyond us. But what we did with this episode is we were able to localize that and show how our actions can be translated to better stewardship. If we just take a minute to think about, do we really need to buy 10 of these or five of these? And do we need to throw our stuff away so quickly? Maybe not. And you look at we even got into the kind of the old world craft of fabric making to kind of give some context to what it means to cherish something, to make something, to have something that we cherish and hold on to. This fashion episode is a darling because we look at it. I don't think anybody's saying, gee, don't buy new clothes. I don't
Right.
think anybody's saying that. But what I do think is we're showing through science the kind of the big stakes, the big problems, where where old clothes go to die, and oftentimes in landfills, open landfills around the world that will take that are continuing to contaminate the environment. And maybe we just slow down our thinking. If we just slow down with our thinking on our need and our desires to have more stuff, we can become part of the solution.
We have so many young children out there who are so smart and like to learn. Wouldn't it be great to teach them the part of this episode where they showed them making the dye and doing all that? That would be, pretty awesome. Like that was exciting to me to see that, that local guy who was doing that.
Yeah, how cool it is to think that a guy can walk into the local mountains and
Mhm.
run around some clippers and cut some plants and see these green leaves turn into something yellow, red, or different colors that will now be used in to dye wool that he's using his hands to create into a fabric. Wow, who wants to throw that away?
Fascinating. And then our local homeboy here, I didn't even know that company was doing that with clothing. It's like, I want to go volunteer because that's just amazing to be doing something with the clothes that, the retailers want to know what to do with. I thought that was very informative as well.
We were blown away by the that a local organization
Yeah.
can repurpose clothing that might have been destined for a landfill and can take nearly all of it and keep it out of a landfill and repurpose it for people to gain clothing that and gain access to clothing that is perfectly fine. Recreate new clothing with stuff, take that fabric and do something with it
Yeah.
or turn it into something other than putting it into the landfills. It's not the ultimate solution because recycling doesn't always work. Upcycling, downcycling, all the cyclings, it's helpful
Yeah.
and it is a part of the solution. But here again, it's part of that bigger loop, isn't it? Where
Yeah.
we decide we're going to buy something, and if we decide to throw it away, it becomes a problem. We decide to hang on to it, it becomes less of a problem. But at the end of the day, there are people who are coming up with really creative and fascinating solutions, and including the scientific community that's looking at clothing from an entirely different point of view.
Yeah.
So it's really cool.
Yeah, I'm teaching my grandsons, don't throw clothes in the trash. We've got another pile and we donate our stuff to the, the veterans. And that's where our stuff goes. Nothing goes in the trash. That's clothing. So it's one step to teach our grandkids and our kids. So
That's right.
wonderful episode. The next one is San Clemente Island, protecting land and sea. That was so informative. It's like, wow, birds and all these critters and flowers and plants. It's amazing.
Yeah, one of, San Clemente Island has always been a mystery to me. I've been curious about it since I was a kid. I knew it was there. I knew what it was being used for. I always wanted to see it. Never had an opportunity to see it. And as a producer, to be able to go out to San Clemente Island was an exciting opportunity. As a viewer, if I just turn the paradigm for a minute, I realize that boy, we get to have a unique look at an island that has been cloaked in mystery for decades. So the Channel Islands are a beautiful chain of islands that everybody gets to enjoy and get to see, except for San Clemente Island because it's owned by the U.S. Navy. But you think about the Channel Islands were inhabited by indigenous people. It's a chain of islands that has a natural beauty away from the shores, our shores, and so each island has had its own pristine content in terms of plants and animals and so on. The somewhere in the late in the 19th century, the San Clemente Island was being used for ranching and some level of farming, and there was a lot of industry that was happening. Not industry in terms of factories industry. I'm talking about more
Yeah.
along the lines of ranching. And that ranching with pigs and goats and sheep and different animals kind of denuded the island and took its toll on the natural beauty and the natural wonder of that island that was occupied by indigenous people prior. The Navy received the island in the 1930s as as it was given to the Navy by FDR, and it became a place where the Navy could it could practice what it does for a living in a place that was safe from and away from local
Yeah.
cities and local areas. So they have been traditionally using the island for uh, practice for their practice for many decades. But what was fascinating for me to learn is that simultaneous to their occupation and use of the island for military purposes, they took a great interest in really taking looking at the ecosystem of the island. And that was they're, bringing plants back, bringing animals back, seeing what the condition of the island was and working to preserve it while they're busy using it. So there was kind of this duality thing going on where we have this great need by the US Navy. We gotta blow stuff up. We got to learn how to do the work that the Navy does. But does that mean simultaneously that we have to destroy something? And between the Department of the Interior, the U.S. Navy, and biologists, local organizations, and biologists, they were looking at the island holistically. And what they were able to do is identify species that were in danger many decades ago. And over the decades since, we're able to repopulate five animal and plant species and bring them back off of the endangered species list. I don't know of any place that's been able to do that. And so while we can be busy saying, oh, there's the Navy and they're blowing stuff up,
Mhm.
oh, by the way, this is the fun turn of events. That place is also a nature preserve. And the Navy is actually using a very small portion of the island for their activities. And the rest of the island is just gorgeous. It was a sight to behold. And what an opportunity to bring to the viewing public that it's possible for two things to coexist at the same time.
Yeah, I thank you for that because it was pretty amazing. Like you said, I never really thought about it, and it was like it's great for us folks to see that, and help out if there's any way that needs to be helped too, donations or what it takes to keep it going. So thank you for that one. The last one is combating climate change with trees. Wow, I didn't even know that there was a central Alameda town, and just to see it be, we all live in concrete when we're here in LA and stuff, and we take for granted those trees, and I see people chopping down trees, and it's like, oh my goodness, do they have to do that? So
Yeah, I think we learned in this episode that trees are kind of a magical component to Southern California. We are such an arid we have such an arid climate in our region.
yeah.
And one of the things we learned with this episode and other stories that are coming down the pike is that there are parts of Los Angeles that were redlined, and redlining meant at a time at a time past that some areas were deserving of more investment than others. Wealthy communities in the Southern California region had access to and greater access to tree canopy as well as other things. Investment in the community that translated into a greener environment. There were
Mhm.
parts of Southern California that were more destined for the industrial side, and they didn't get so much of the investment for infrastructure. And so that inequity has really come to the forefront for cities and for the county of Los Angeles as well, seeing a great need to fix that. Trees are a simple combatant to the problems with climate change. So if we're going to look at a series, we're going to take on a series that has to do with sustainability and climate change. If we are heating up, what better way to do that than to provide shade? Well, shade is a wonderful thing. It can knock many, many degrees off of an area. We have
Yeah.
open concrete, it's really hot. If we have open concrete with a tree over it, it's really nice to be under that tree. So
Yeah.
this episode really centers on the beauty of and the importance of and the need for expanding our tree canopy in the Southern California region. And there are scientists who have been looking hard at this and studying the impact of tree canopy on local communities, and it's profound. So this is an area, you're right. We should treasure trees. We shouldn't get rid of them. We should keep them. They're wonderful.
But what made me really say really was when the one woman was talking about palm trees. Who knew that, the things that she talked about palm trees? It's like, we have them out where I live in West Cucamonga, and it's like we have a lot of wind out there, and those, they go flying, the little whatever's on there, and the their leaves. It's like, so I was kind of impressed what I learned a little bit about why palm trees aren't so good.
Well, they're iconic, right? They're
Yes.
when anybody
Hollywood.
does a movie about Hollywood or LA, there's always a drive down a boulevard
Yeah.
with palm trees in the skyline. Wow. With the and that's such an iconic view, isn't it?
Yeah.
But I think what we're missing is the reality that trees serve a much greater purpose than that. And palm trees, while they may look iconic and look interesting to our region, we're missing out on that very space occupied by a palm tree. Could be occupied with something with a greater tree canopy and provide more protection, and not only for us, but for insects and animals who also require better care from heat. And we're not the only ones. We shouldn't be just so self-centered about that. We're sharing our community with other species, and boy, trees really help that.
So out of these four episodes, what did you learn, were so surprised and learned the most about of the four?
Well, I think all of them brought something to me that I hadn't
Yeah.
maybe thought about. These are issues that that we wrestle with on a on a as a in my company we wrestle with
Yeah.
these issues all the time. But localizing it and looking at it from a vantage point where, gosh, our actions, our actions, whether it's growing a tree or giving away our clothing or hanging onto our clothing, or just thinking about what our impact with electricity and what we do, our habits, uh, all of these things kind of come into play and give me a sense of satisfaction that as a steward, as one person, I can become a better steward of the community.
Yeah.
As one of the producers of this project, of course we're tuned in to these ideas, and of course we're tuned into the storytelling that comes out in these four episodes. But I'm also a viewer, a consumer, and an inhabitant of something called planet Earth.
Yes.
And it to me, I take a lot of joy in thinking that out of something like this that really, quite frankly, only can only happen in public television, I can learn something new that will allow me to be a better steward. That to me was the great takeaway. I actually have some power to do something. Now, whether we do something, we choose to do something or not, that's up to us as individuals. But if we're given the problems, if we're shown the problems, and we're allowed in to see the access to the science and how scientists view the problems that we deal with. And we find people on a local level who are actually doing something about it. It gives us great authority over our own actions. We actually have an opportunity to do something. That's what I loved about this series.
Yes, and everyone who watches it will love that on PBS SoCal. Uh, Looks here like it premieres Wednesday, June 25th at 7:30 on PBS SoCal. It also encored Sunday, June 29th on PBS SoCal Plus, and they have them every Wednesday for the next three Wednesdays after that.
Megan Chow, who's one of the executive producers she's an executive producer on this project with me.
Like I say, we'll put this up on our we have a YouTube channel, Holler Times Official. We'll be putting this interview up there. Also, I'll be putting all the links for PBS as well to let all of our viewers know how to find this amazing, wonderful show. Earth Focus has always been amazing, and these four, I have to say, are right up there. Congratulations.
Thanks. I'd like to maybe add one more thing that I'm just sitting here thinking,
Sure.
if you don't mind. I think that we should all be happy to have access to things that are hard to find any other place. I know I mentioned at the top that one of the great values of public television is that we do, as viewers, have access to things that other people may not cover or maybe won't take an active interest in.
Yes.
But how fortunate we are to be at a time through active television, through streaming, through social media, to be able to take on these subjects that are important to us as individuals and find ways where we can be actively engaged. That's why we decided to be a part of this series. That's the value that we saw in helping public television bring this to the marketplace.
Very well said. And I like to give money to PBS, and all the rest of us should too. It's an amazing platform. Thank you, Dan, for joining us today at the Hollywood Times. We greatly appreciate it.
My pleasure.